you call
By the way,
on that day?
Nancy Pelosy, I don't have, why would I tell you that? Listen, Nancy Pelosy was in charge of security. She turned down 10,000 soldiers. If she didn't turn down the soldiers, you wouldn't have had January 6th.
Did you? Oh, he comes, I'm going to punch him out. This is my
wow,
moment.
I would pay to see
I've
that.
been waiting for this, for trespassing on the Capitol grounds. I'm going to punch him out, and I'm going to go to jail, and I'm going to be happy.
Responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. This is ridiculous. You're going to ask me in the middle of the thing when they've already breached the inaugural stuff that should we call the Capitol Police? I mean, the National Guard? Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
They thought that they had sufficient resources.
That is not a question of how they had been. They don't know. They clearly didn't know, and I take responsibility for not having them just prepare for
what is this clip? Why is it important? And why are we still talking about this in June of 2024, less than 6 months from election? This happened 4 years ago, ma'am.
We're talking about it still because the Democrats have spent 3 years and $20 million creating a narrative that Donald Trump was to blame for the events on January 6th, even though it was President Trump who tried to authorize the national troops that day and was rejected. So why this footage of Nancy Pelosi taking responsibility for National Guard not being there on January 6th is explosive, but it's also infuriating for someone like me who got tied up in all this January 6th garbage. But I mean, it was Nancy Pelosi who did not authorize the National Guard coming. And this is also why Nancy Pelosi, if you remember, blocked people like Jim Banks from being on the January 6th committee, because she knew then that if there was an actual January 6th committee that focused on why the Capitol was so unprotected that day, all roads would have led back to Nancy Pelosi, because as Speaker, it was her job to secure the Capitol. And for those of us who, thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans who attended a peaceful rally at the White House ellipse, one of which I was involved in, we knew that there were hundreds of thousands of people showing up. The National Guard knew, the police knew, everyone knew that. You could tell every hotel room within 100 miles was fully booked. And so they knew that there was a tremendous amount of people coming. They knew those people were going to march. They act like it was some sort of fake or secret march. The RSVP website was called TrumpMarch.com. The background of Trump's speech was March to Save America. So what did they think everyone was going to do afterwards? They have spent the last 3 years gaslighting us and blaming Donald Trump. And it is absolutely ridiculous, because for the left, they've used the court systems to attack our founding rights, undermine the rule of law, and erode our nation's most cherished principles and values. And really, I mean, not since the Red Scare has our country seen such a brazen attempt by elected officials to trample on the civil liberties of American citizens in order to expose and demonize their political adversaries. And at the end of the day, we can make no mistake about this. This was General Milley, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Susan Rice orchestrating a coup against the American people on January 6th. This is why when Donald Trump gets back in, we must have a Republican Senate. We must have a Congress, a Republican-led Congress with an actual spine and an oversight committee chair who is willing to investigate and do the same thing, I would hope, to our enemies that they did to us.
Why do you think this is stirred up and a brouhaha on the right and in some corners of the media today?
Well, because of the fact is that the President of the United States, the former president, and his toadies do not want to face the facts. They're trying to do revisionist history on January 6th. But we cannot let us be dragged into their, again, false impression of what happened that day. They know what happened that day. They know how serious it is and was and continues to have an impact on our country. And yet they want to call the people who were in there hostages. Last night I received the Lincoln Award. I was so proud of receiving that. And I said in my remarks, Lincoln built the dome on the Capitol. He insisted that it be built during the Civil War so that it could show the resilience of America. And to see these people coming through the Capitol with their foul deeds and foul actions, waving Confederate flags and Nazi flags under Lincoln's dome was so shameful. And yet this president who incited, this former president who incited this insurrection would not send the National Guard for hours. People were harmed, people were killed, but died one way or another. And what did he do but try to deny that any of it happened? This is a terrible thing, but let us not take away the attention of what we need to do to go forward. We have to unify our country. We have to bring people together in a way that honors the vision of our founders, the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, as well as the aspirations of our children. I just came back from D-Day in Normandy to see our veterans there it was the 80th anniversary of it. Some of the youngest of them were 97, some over 100. They fought for our freedom, and yet you see how it is being denigrated by the former president and his Republican toadies.
By the way,
on that day,
Nancy Pelosy. Why would I tell you that? Listen, Nancy Pelosy was in charge of security. She turned down 10,000 soldiers. If she didn't turn down the soldiers, you wouldn't have had January 6th.
Did you call military or law enforcement?
What?
Did you call military or law enforcement at the moment the Capitol was under attack?
I'm not going to tell you anything. Let me put it this way. I behaved so well. I did such a good job. Nancy Pelosi turned down 10,000 soldiers. If she didn't do that,
but
and now
Nancy
I understand.
Pelosi doesn't have the authority that
the
you
police
have as commander-in-chief, though.
Listen to me, Kristen. Listen to me. I understand that the police testified against her, the chief very strongly against her, Capitol Police, great people. They testified against her, and they burned all the evidence. Okay, they burned all the evidence. They destroyed all the evidence about Nancy Pelosi.
What do you say to people who wonder why you as commander-in-chief, you have authorities that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have as commander-in-chief?
No, she has authority over the
Why didn't
Capitol.
you send help in that moment, though?
Frankly, just so you understand, I assumed that she took care of it. She turned down.
So when you realized that the National Guard wasn't coming?
Well, you don't realize anything until quite a while. National Guard not coming. I asked it to be there 3 days in advance, and she turned it down.
She says that request was never officially made.
Oh,
just so you know.
Let me just tell you.
Let me ask you about pardons, Mr. President.
The mayor of D.C. gave us a letter saying that she turns it down. Okay, we have it. Nancy Pelosi also was asked, and she turned it down. The police commissioner
I'm talking about
Capitol
the day
Police,
of, though.
wait a minute.
Yep.
Capitol Police said that he wanted it, and Nancy Pelosi wouldn't accept it. She's responsible for January 6th.
Mr. President.
Nancy Pelosi's responsible.
Mr. President, you're the president, though. You have
her.
authorities that no one else has as the commander-in-chief. Do you think you showed leadership on that day?
Yes, absolutely, I did.
Okay.